Today, I want to talk to you about solving the largest unsolved problem in security, human risk. Did you know that if we take a look at the last 5 years worth of large cybersecurity incidents, 88% of all of the total losses were directly attributed to human risk? Now, what do I mean when I say human risk? Human risk is the collection of security decisions that your employees make on a regular basis that can either increase or decrease your attack surface. I'm Masha Sedova, the co-founder of Elevate Security, and over the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity of building the leading human risk management platform that helps organizations solve specifically this problem. Before that, I have spent the last decade of my career tackling this problem by bringing in behavioral science and psychology to help employees want to do security instead of just have to. And in this presentation, I'm really excited to be sharing with you some of the secrets and hard-earned lessons that I have learned throughout my career in hopes that these are things you might be able to apply in your organizations. Now, one of the things that I have seen in working with organizations for the last decade on this problem is the fact that we are in a no-win cycle that everyone hates being on, that does little to help us address this problem, even though this is exactly what it's trying to do. Now, what do I mean by that? We often send out our employees a one-size-fits-all training. Now, if I ask any of you in the audience if you've ever had to take one of these, and if you brute forced the quiz questions at the end, I bet most of you would raise your hand. I know I would. Now, by doing that, our employees are no more empowered to make their unintentional mistakes less often. Things like clicking on links, navigating to malicious websites, downloading malware on their machine, all while unintentional, still lead to incidents that our organizations are cleaning up. Now, what kind of impact does that have? It puts our poor, overworked security teams, particularly our SOC analysts, our incident responders, under a workload that is becoming more and more unbearable every day. And this fatigue and overwork doesn't have an end in sight, because fundamentally, when we take a look at trying to solve this, we buy more and more technology that only helps solve for the symptoms and not the root cause of this problem. We throw more money and more tech, and yet we are still on this no-win cycle where unintentional employee actions, human risk, if you will, lead us to cause these incidents and ultimately the cleanup that we are faced with on a daily basis. And this actually hasn't changed our situation in years. In fact, if we take the last Verizon data breach report that came out in last May, we see that 2/3 of all the breaches are directly tied back to human risk factors. So despite all of our efforts around training our employees and trying to clean up incidents, we are no further ahead in tackling these top line issues that are concern for many organizations year after year. And so it is no longer an option that we can take by leaving human risk unsolved for and a compliance checkbox if we expect our security teams and our incident response teams to be able to keep up in any meaningful way to the evolving and growing threat landscape ahead of us. So how do we actually tackle this problem? Well, you can't improve what you don't measure. And one of the things that I come across very frequently working with organizations is CISOs and security teams telling me, well, we do measure it. We measure by how many people have completed a security training. And while knowledge is important, it's not enough. What your employees know and what your employees do are two very different things. If we take driving as an example, the amount of people who pass their driving theoretical tests instead of their practice is probably a significant gap. And that's why we actually make sure we have both of these before giving somebody their driver's license. And the same goes for security, and specifically around human risk. It's what your employees do in the wild, if you will, that matters the most. And there are actually a lot of things your employees are doing on a daily basis that you already are collecting logs about that can help paint this picture. So when your employee browses to a website that is blocked by your web security platform, great. That's intent data that shows that an employee may not be making thoughtful decisions or trying to download malware that has to be blocked. Incidents, it has been stopped because you have your security controls in place, and that's great, but your employee is still choosing to make those risky decisions. And all of those decisions start painting a picture that can be combined into a user reputation score. So if you take the security actions that your employees are taking, both good and bad, like do they use a password manager and MFA? Fantastic. Their score should go up. And you combine that with their access level to understand what the blast radius of their risky decisions are and how attacked they are. You're able to get together a really amazing picture that we've never before had in our organizations and our disposals that lets us understand risk at an individual level. And by taking this, we no longer have a one-size-fits-all approach for all of our employees who fundamentally have different risk levels and have different impact levels to our organization. So we can create profiles that track not just what an employee is good and bad at, but specifically what kind of business risks those actions might lead to, like ransomware, account takeover, loss of data, or privacy risk. And so we're able to start thinking through proactively, based on people's past decisions, what kind of risks we might be in for in the future. What's more is if you start mapping this against your HR data, you can start painting a picture across your department. Rolling this up into manager, department, and organizational level will actually give you a view of your org as a whole. And what you'll find is that there are going to be departments and regions and managers that are riskier than others and in certain areas. And what this information is empowering you to do is focus your time and attention and resources on tackling the problem in the areas that need it the most first, because resources are limited and not everyone is going to need the same type of interventions as others. One of the things that we're really excited to share this week is that we've published a cutting-edge research report alongside Scientia Research Institute that pulls together the 4.5 million data points we have across security decisions made by 114,000 employees. And what we've done is take a look at the common trends that exist out of these data sets and pulled this into this report, which you can download on our website. And the things that we've identified is that contractors are actually less likely across the board to click and compromise as compared to non-contractors. Managers, on the other hand, are more likely to click and compromise themselves than non-managers. And if we unpack that last graph in a little bit more detail, we take a look at where somebody sits in hierarchy of the organization to actually understand how likely they are to both click and compromise on phishing, but also download malware. And what we have found is that it's actually the squishy middle, as I call it. The managers, the middle managers, especially the frontline managers, your first-time managers are the ones that are likely to introduce the risk above all others. And what this can help you do is understand that maybe that is a population that might require a little bit more attention. And in the same way that we have new hire training, maybe you have new manager training, and how do you balance security along with your responsibility of management? Now that we've identified these risks and we have these pools of employees who might need more attention than others, the next question comes out, well, how do you actually mitigate this? Because knowing the problem is really just the first half. You actually need to tackle it. Now I want to ask the audience about a 3 strikes you're out rule. If you are not familiar with 3 strikes you're out, it's an organizational policy where if, as an employee, if you click on a phishing link 3 times, you're fired. So by quick show of hands, if you could type in with your, if you could use the emoji chat, could you raise your hand if your organization has a 3 strikes you're out rule or something quite similar? It looks like there's definitely a few of us who are participants in an organization like that. Now I got to tell you, this is a growing trend that I'm seeing, and it causes me a lot of concern because we have employees in our organizations who contribute in so many ways to our overlying business. And we have incredible salespeople and incredible engineers who might just not get security. Does that mean we should fire them? In some cases, Yes, but that shouldn't be the only resource we have, either more training or firing somebody to actually manage this risk that feels very, very black and white. So what I want to unpack with you is the huge amount of areas and resources we actually have at our disposal to start mitigating this risk before we even move to something as intense as a 3 strikes you're out rule. Now, there are 3 components you need to actually manage and tackle human risk in your organization. First is visibility, and we've already talked about this, but you need to know if you're getting better or worse and how your departments are trending compared to each other. The second area is actually tailoring your security to the risk levels of employees depending on where they are. I think about this as bubble wrapping your risky employees, and how many layers of bubble wrap, it really is determined upon how risky that specific employee is right now. And that's a really great fix for managing the risk in your organization today. But we also need to tackle this problem in the long term because we really want to get to the root cause. And that's where the influence piece, that's actually tying back to the employee and addressing the root cause. I want to unpack both proactive security and the influence piece in a little more detail with you next. So when we take a look at tuning our security controls, in the past, maybe even in the present, we have to do this manually. It's very resource intensive. We're creating groups and permissioning with relatively broad brushstrokes because frankly, it's very time intensive. It takes a lot of effort, and often it's a blanket approach. And those controls tend to be far too restrictive to the majority of your organization and not restrictive enough. Most of the time we do it for the lowest common denominator. We take the riskiest population, the riskiest possible outcome, and we tune it for the rest of the organization, which makes for a really painful and business experience that is full of friction for the majority of your employees, making the security team not particularly popular within the organization. Now take a look at what is possible when you have risk defined by the individual. You're able to tune your security controls. Maybe it's browser settings, maybe it's email security solutions, maybe it's how much monitoring and access you give somebody. And that can be based on an individual level. So you give just enough controls around every individual as their risk changes both up and down. If we take a look at that in a little bit more detail, and we pull up Stephen that we looked at earlier, Stephen's not particularly good at malware specifically, but he's overall a risky employee. And so we should probably put him in a group of settings where we're limiting his unknown software execution on his device. We're increasing how sensitive his email filtering is, and we're putting him in a group that has the most restrictive browser settings. So he's definitely an employee who probably shouldn't be visiting social media or any sites that aren't totally reputable. Now, if we take somebody on the other end, Josie, for example, in engineering, Josie's a rock star. She hasn't had any security mishaps in 2 years of any of our security logs. And so let her run free in the security environment or in the network and the data environment because she's proven it. So what does that actually look like? Maybe if she has a policy exception request or access request, we can auto approve that, saving our help desk time and intensive thought. We can maybe relax her browser restrictions and let her play Candy Crush if she wants. And what's more of a perk is that we can opt her out of some security training because she's already mastered the real world exam, which is navigating real attacks as they come at her. And so this becomes a totally different conversation with the business, and we're able to enable them to move much more freely than we have in the past. Now, to dive into the influence piece, I'm going to let you in on a secret that most behavioral scientists are aware. If you're going to change your behavior, you need 3 things to exist at the same time. You need the motivation to do it, the ability to do it, and a prompt, something that reminds you. And you need all 3 at the same time in order to do that specific behavior. In security, we have totally nailed the ability piece. We have spent a lot of time educating our employees around what is phishing, how not to click it, what is malware, how to be aware of it. And so ability And the knowledge piece of that, sure, it's there, but we don't spend any time motivating them, really telling them why they should care and how it relates to them. And we can take a lot of lessons around motivation from many other fields that already exist out there, including advertisement or your fitness tracker. So your fitness tracker is excellent at motivating you to run a few extra miles, walk a few extra steps. And let's see what that actually looks like in practice. In security, because we now know an individual's strengths and weaknesses, we can give tailored feedback specifically to where they're at. So we can give them a security strength score and show them how they're improving over time and what they need to do to move from tenuous to indestructible, as an example. We can compare their performance to their peer group, to their department, and when they're doing great, give badges, and if they're not doing great, below a threshold, we can give them course corrective actions. Now, what this does is it ties security to things that people already care about. Intrinsic motivation, like competition, like winning, like belonging, maybe not being last. And all of these things help us get to the same security outcomes we would have wanted to get anyway without using the stick approach. So we have seen this to be incredibly effective at communicating back to the employee and helping them come along the security journey with us. And so we talked about a lot of different components of this, and a lot of the things that I've learned throughout my career, I've had the opportunity of pulling into the Elevate Security platform, which helps companies manage and influence their human risk. So you have the ability today to leverage a lot of the security tools and technologies you've already invested in to create a human risk score that gives you an understanding of where your employees are and where they're trending. You can use that information then to inform a lot of your security controls to create risk bubbles around your employees, and then you can provide really great and tailored feedback to your employees exactly where they are in their journey. If you'd like to know about the platform or anything else that we offer, please do have a chance to visit our website, elevatesecurity.com. And I leave you with one of my favorite quotes in this space. People are the weakest link in security is a comfortable excuse to lean on when it really should be a rallying cry to change the status quo. With that, thank you very much.